Alright, just doing a quick sharpening video here, hopefully fairly quick. Always questions about freehand sharpening, how best to approach it, and the conversation kind of glosses over a lot of the mechanical aspect of actually holding the knife. And if you watch enough videos, particularly like the Korean series and some of the other Japanese inspired sharpeners out there, they typically use the same hand for both. Not all of them, but some of them. And they'll use an angled scrubbing pass on edge toward them, and then they flip and they'll use more of a sweep or a straight scrub. In some cases this is because they're working a hollow underside of the knife they have, but in other cases it's difficult to mimic that exact mechanics as stably as doing that. Every person that takes up freehand sharpening eventually will have to find their own way. And I've had multiple wrist surgeries, so for me, my own technique has changed many times over the years. So here I am, I've got a burr everywhere but right in here, and I'm just feeling for it. If you start out with a fairly dull knife, and you go to sharpen, and you rub your thumb across it, you'll feel nothing. And as you work, you'll start to feel places where there is a burr, where you have ground all the way to the apex. If it's not obvious, you can keep going and just work on just that one spot. This is how I do it. I tend to raise the burr, eliminate most of it, flip it, and then do the other side. So this 400 grit Atoma with oil is cutting a little slower than it normally would, but with the oil it tends to cut pretty clean too. The last thing I want is for the burr to flip, like to try to eliminate it in place. In this case, I'm really just shrinking it. So mechanically, I was like this before. I'm balancing that angle control between thumb and index finger. When I flip, I still want to have elements of that. So I'm still using the bottom three fingers, emphasizing the pull. Most of this pivot's just right at the elbow. A bigger knife like this, I will frequently completely invert, but then I wind up with a different type of scratch pattern. It's not like an issue. Whatever you can do, and you can do this, you could slow it down and just kind of study the tool on the stone to see if it's rocking, how much it's rocking, how much do you feel it twisting in your hand. A lot of people are a little surprised maybe that you can detect a burr that reliably without even looking, but your fingertips are surprisingly sensitive. In some research they've proven that the human fingertip is capable of resolving stuff down into the nanoscale. You can tell the difference. Big fan of the Atomas. So this is just a utility chopper. It gets used by the family. It gets beat up a little bit. you'll note I did not visually check for the absence of a burr at all. So I'm done essentially with the 400. I'm going to do a couple leading passes. My flip sides, I'm going to elevate, just lightly brushing that off. There's probably a burr there. And I'm going to lead. On hard plates, hard stones, your last pass typically better off leading. The oil gives me a little bit of extra play on that. Maybe I could finish with a trailing pass if this were my last stone. Diamond resin, I got this thing impregnated with oil. To me, this is the next step. You could also strop, or you could move to another plate, maintain the same angles. For me, I'm just going to, what was my original angle? About here, I can feel it, and elevate just slightly. Again, I'm constantly minding my angle control with this stuff. It is the most important factor when you're freehanding. Everything else you can figure out. Well, maybe I need a loop to detect my burrs. Maybe I'm not apexing all the way. All that stuff you can take your time, visually verify. But if you cannot maintain the angle you set out to maintain fairly close, within a couple degrees at the most, hopefully, you're going to have a very difficult time improving your craft. This is a resin stone. I can get away with pretty much exclusively trailing passes. If it were like a hard ceramic plate, I would want to finish with leading. Get this off of here and this. 400. Now to finish, I've got a 140 Atoma plate with a piece of newspaper over the top. You can actually feel some of these high points. This concentrates the pressure a little bit. And because it's just paper, I can actually elevate my angle a little bit. And if I'm not working with large carbides in the steel, which I don't believe I am with this Kitchen Aid, you can get a bit of a burnishing effect right along the apex. Alright, so that was two-step. Again, whatever path you decide to take, switching hands, whatever, pay attention, get your Sharpie, mark it, figure out what is going on with your angle control. And it may involve stopping, examining, hey, maybe I lose it a little bit in the belly. You know, so do I. But you want to be able to hold it reasonably tight. So this is 400 Atoma on a couple passes. A lot of people don't like to do micro bevel. To me, if you're only doing it a degree or two, it's no different than the amount of angle that you're going to increase if you use an abrasive strop. Even with very fine abrasives, you are definitely, you know, they need pressure to work, and that pressure is going to trail off the cutting edge. You can bury the shoulder to kind of minimize that, but they all need pressure to work. So for me, if I use a very shallow micro bevel, that's no different than stropping, whatever you want to do. Stropping probably is a little more forgiving, and definitely for maintenance purposes, stropping will extend the life. If I want to micro bevel again, basically I have to match that same angle that I originally did, lay it in enough so that the apex reforms. So stropping has some advantages. I like the edge I get off of a micro bevel. It allows me to customize between a very fine abrasive and something as low as a 140. If I want a really aggressive slicer, but I want some life out of it and have it chopped, I'll definitely put a micro bevel on it and go from there. Anyway, just kind of putting it out there. Grip control. I don't have a lot of hard and fast tips, except try to balance between your thumb and your index finger, whichever side you're on. Whatever it takes. On smaller knives, it can be difficult to get those fingers in there. Maybe you can't, but then you want to really be paying attention to the feel of the handle moving. Keep your pass short. You know, you can make a couple longer ones as you finish or if you're deburring, but the shorter the mechanical pass is, the less likely you are to drift off of that angle you're going for. Anyway, thanks for watching.